I don't really see things changing that much, at least not between the black and white thing. I mean, you are in the South, and people from both cultures are just sort of being spoon-fed this from the time they're born. You know, you have people from both races with chips on their shoulders still, and as long as they're hanging on to the past, you know, it's going to keep being the present.
Some people will tell you Memphis is one of the most racially divided cities in America. Others say it is no worse than any other American city.
Tonight we begin a three-part series. We're going to explore the racial divide in Memphis, its origin, the impact, and the solutions. Here now are I-Team reporters Jason Carter and Ernie Freeman with part one of Memphis in Black and White.
Neighborhoods, schools, even churches in Memphis usually come in one color, black or white. A city so divided it begs the question, how did we get here?
Most of us know about the civil rights movement, the sanitation strikes, and the assassination of Dr. King. But that's not where the racial divide started, or by no means where it ends.
Racism and prejudice is not confined to one race.
Unfortunately, in Memphis, we've made black and poor a synonym.
We resegregated.
This remains a moral issue.
I don't think it can be done by just the mayor.
Can Willie Harrington bring us together? I didn't separate us.
It certainly wasn't Mayor Willie Harrington who created the racial division we experience every day in Memphis. But where did it start? When did we decide that we were different solely based on the color of our skin? That our cultural differences were too much to try and understand? Some historians will tell you it started when the first slave was brought into the Americas. Others will argue it was during the Civil War or in subsequent years of Reconstruction. In America's South, no one can deny these transgressions in history. But in Memphis, there's one time period which appears to be a turning point.
And so we had a big chance to decide what kind of city will Memphis be after this tragedy, which yellow fever was far more devastating in terms of death and, loss of money than the Civil War was.
With the deaths of thousands in Memphis because of yellow fever and an exodus of the white elite, poor Memphians, black Memphians took over the management of the city. But it was only temporary.
So then when the people come back to the city and the city's trying to recover from yellow fever, we want to displace, people in Memphis want to displace people who have had responsible jobs, many of whom were African American.
So with white money back in town calling the shots, political steps are taken to secure their power. Nathan Bedford Forrest Park is created. Lynchings become a means of intimidation. And like much of the South, Jim Crow becomes law. So Memphis is again separate and not equal.
Those of us who are older remember all the vestiges of Jim Crow, and a lot of older blacks and older politicians can't get that out of their minds, their remembrance of the days when they were completely locked out and discriminated against.
The injustices of Jim Crow need no description. Separate facilities, schools, and means of transportation only widen the gap of race relations and understanding. Even though there were some movements to evolve with the employments of blacks to the police and fire departments, the city was black and white. But a Supreme Court decision in 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, was set to change that by integrating the school system.
Years ago, integration was felt like it was absolutely necessary to guarantee equal quality. You weren't going to get equal quality as long as you had separate systems. The whites would get better systems, better schools, better teachers, more opportunities, and the blacks would get, what was left behind.
But white Memphis wasn't ready to change. The idea the federal government was going to dictate the rules created a nearly 2-decade feud. 18 years after Brown versus Board of Education, Judge Robert McRae forced busing in Memphis in the federal case, Deborah Northcross versus MCS. The ruling meant that now white kids and black kids would be bused into integrated schools.
Yeah, blacks and whites in Memphis were dissatisfied with forced busing, and largely for the same reasons. But historians say it was the reaction of whites that would forever change the complexion of Memphis City schools. When the buses rolled on January 24th, 1973 in Memphis, Henry Baskin had gotten halfway through the first grade. By the end of the week, the federal courts had forced him to go to another school.
Up to first grade, I went to Weaver Elementary, a black school in my neighborhood. But they closed it down in the middle of my first grade year. I got bused to Coral Lake to become a white school.
Back then, the Memphis schools had an almost equal number of black and white students, but almost none of them went to the same schools. 1 month after the busing order, 100,000 white students were out of city schools and enrolled in private schools, mostly in East Memphis. Historian Charles McKinney says they did that out of fear.
You have instances where folks are like, no, black boys in school with white girls? Oh, no, that can't happen. Bad things will happen if that goes on.
1 year after forced busing, 23,000 white students were gone from the city school system. Steve Cullums, an Overton High grad, remembers the racially tense and divisive times leading up to forced busing.
There were times when predominantly white schools would play African-American schools, and no one could attend the game other than the players and the coaches, the officials. Even the site would not be announced.
Over the next couple of decades, federal judge Robert McRae forced minority hiring and promotions in city agencies like the fire and police departments. Former Mayor Dick Hackett says that didn't help ease racial tensions.
Well, it's difficult. Anytime that a federal judge thinks they ought to be the administrator of the city, I used to jokingly say I'm the mayor of the city in name, but Judge McRae runs the city. That got way out of hand.
In 1991, Black Memphis came together at the so-called People's Convention. The object? Nominate a single black candidate for mayor. They nominated Willie Harrington, and they did not invite any white people. Former Democratic Party Chairman David Cox says that didn't help ease racial tensions either.
It was a very racially polarized time, and things evolved in a way that really didn't help the racial polarization.
Harrington would defeat Hackett by the slimmest of margins with a promise of racial unity.
I want one city, not two cities. We want one city where we're all together to make Memphis become a part of a new South.
16 years later, the mayor's promise of one city has gone unfulfilled. And the man who said he wanted racial unity is now a symbol of a city racially divided. But is that Mayor Harrington's fault? Who's to blame for years of segregation, hate, and division? And most importantly, how does it affect us?
Tomorrow night, we're going to show you just how divided we are. We'll show you where we go to school, where we live, and how far we have not come. Reporting in the studio, I'm Jason Carter alongside Ernie Freeman. Fox 13 News, I-Team.